What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode review for Trigun Stampede. This is episode 12, also the final episode of, I guess, this season. With me, as always, I have Blue Spade.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that has me scratching my head as to how and why they decided to end this season off this way.
It felt like it was
Um,
the conclusion to the entire series with the way that it was built up, and also with the fact that Knives is supposed to be, as far as I know, the main villain of the series. It really felt like this was it. So I am kind of surprised they're doing another season. I just wonder what there is
I
left
mean,
for them to do. But
I will say that the animation of that fight scene was definitely the best
yeah,
of the entire
well,
show.
I'm not
But
surprised. I mean,
it's
I
just
figured that they would definitely put more budget and effort into the animation of, I guess, the final fight. And I mean, yeah, it looked good, but the problem is that I was like having trouble really keeping up with what the hell was happening half the time. Not to mention, like, I'll be completely honest, I've just been checked out of the series since the last episode, so I really didn't care to really understand what I was seeing. So I don't know. And I also just feel like it was just way too much happening for you to even really keep up with anyway. So um, I don't know. I don't know how you felt about it, but I felt nothing watching it. It just to me felt like it was they were just like basically just pulling all these powers out of their ass, like, with no explanation. At least that's the way it felt to me. Like, I don't at least with the original series, there kind of was some reason for why they could do what they do. In this, like, you kind of, I guess you could say, you kind of get somewhat of an explanation in the last couple episodes with the Doctor kind of somewhat alluding to what their abilities are, but I don't know. It just felt like they're pretty much just two gods fighting each other. It is, at least that's the way it felt to me. But I don't know.
yeah, I mean, by the end of it all, it just felt like there's just too many things that were left unresolved, in my opinion.
Yeah,
They just left a lot of stuff by the end, like, pretty ambiguous, especially of course. So when you look at the end, including the end credits scene, which they might indicate something is coming, like another threat is coming, I guess, other than Knives. Assuming if he is like checked out of the entire show, but
probably not.
yeah, it's just yeah, maybe, but the majority of this episode was pretty much Vash versus Knives for the entire episode. I mean, it continues where the last episode leaves off with Knives. I guess he's making contact with Core or whatever it is in this other dimension, and at the same time, he's like impregnating all these other plants so they can give birth to the other independents, like Vash and himself. But at the same time, Meryl, of course, is pleading and screaming to Vash to wake up from his, like, for whatever he's in, whatever trance he's in. And then, of course, we see Vash again, within, like, some kind of vision, or whatever dream he's in. And then, of course, the only thing that really snapped him out of it was just is, of course, Rem, supposedly. And this eventually causes him to regain his senses and supposedly his memories, which they claim that he lost over that whole process.
Well, I also thought it was because he
So
said he heard Meryl's voice, and that kind of snapped him out of it.
yeah, and of course this causes Knives to be ejected from the other dimension, and then this, of course, Vash eventually controls, actually compresses that dimensional portal, like, inside of this cube thing, in which he tries majority of the time to keep it away from Knives, and this leads to, like, pretty much like I said, it is a pretty well animated fight scene between him and both Knives and Vash against each other. Just basically just flying around the entire city of July for the majority of that time. But at the same time, the core that Vash is in his possession is starting to overload, so he's trying to find a way to get it away from the cities, as far away as possible. So in the end, like Vash decides to load his core into his gun and try to fire it into space, but Knives continuously prevents him from firing that beam. But by the time he does so, Vash does fire a beam somewhere far off into space, but Knives just takes the full brunt of it, and supposedly he just gets disintegrated in front of it.
It kind of reminded me of that one scene from the original series where not Knives, but Vash's arm turns into a giant gun, and then like it basically like it fires, I guess, the equivalent of a nuclear blast. And I'm not sure if that's what they were trying to do here, where his arm turns into this like it turns into a giant gun, but it looks very different from the original. Where like in the original it looked more mechanical, in this one it looks more, I guess, organic.
Yeah, more biological.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Similar. I mean, it's similar to what Knives is doing with creating all these blades from his body. Similarly to like how Vash somehow sprouts a wing and then uses like that same type of ability to turn his gun into like this giant cannon like thing. And so eventually, like, I mean, regardless, of whether or not like Knives supposedly gets killed in this, Vash, of course, crashes back down into the city and destroys the entire city, presumably killing 80% of the city's population.
Yeah.
And then soon afterwards, it time skips 2 years later, with Vash, of course, being a fugitive again and supposedly being blamed for the destruction, and of course his bounty going up to 60 billion now, and so like we see Meryl paying her a visit to the city, paying respects to both Roberto and supposedly Vash, and of course she gets visited by Zazzy the Beast, pretty much. What I guess Zazzy's warning that there are other forces coming over to No Man's Land eventually, and and of course another thing is like we briefly see Wolfwood in this episode, just basically just helping Meryl keep her away from the entire fight, or getting her away from the city, I guess. But we don't really see Wolfwood again for the rest of this episode.
Yeah, he really just was, again, he didn't really contribute too much, honestly. Like, he was just there, and he didn't do, I mean, he helped out somewhat, but I don't know, again, it just contributes to, like, none of the characters to me feel like the characters from the original anime, especially, like, characters like Wolfwood. He just feels like he's more like a hollow shell of what he used to be.
Yeah, and speaking of original characters, Meryl, of course, is informed by her superiors that she's being assigned a new partner named Millie Thompson, who, of course, is the character who's been absent throughout this entire season.
Now we know why she, I guess, was absent. They were planning to have Millie come in for this next season and be like the underling of Meryl, and then Roberto was her superior in this season. I don't know. I'm just afraid of what they're gonna like. I mean, I was wondering if we're gonna even get to see Millie at all in this episode, but we don't. So I guess we'll have to wait to see how they redesign Millie, or like in the new season, or how they maybe even change her character.
So, like during Vash's fight with Knives, we see that his hairstyle is back to his original style from the original anime, which is like slicked up instead of.
This kind of pissed me off, I'll be honest, because they were saying before that it was impossible, or I forget why they couldn't render his hair. They couldn't render his hair the way it was in the original series. But then he has his hair slicked back, like he in this last episode. I mean, not exactly looking like it did in the original, but somewhat close. And I'm just wondering why they couldn't have done this the whole time. Why did he have to look like he did if he can look like this in the last episode? I mean, did they just do this to kind of like I don't know. I mean, I don't really understand the idea behind it. Like, were they just trying to be like, oh, here's some fan service, I guess, if you want him to look like the original Vash, we can make him look like that for, I don't know, like maybe for a little bit. I don't know. I don't really understand it. Like, if they can make him look like this in the last episode, why couldn't they have done this for the rest of the series? I don't really get it. But it's just weird to me how, like, yeah, he looks like the original Vash here.
Yeah, and of course, speaking of Vash, we do get to see, Vash by the end of this episode, supposedly suffering from amnesia after that explosion, and supposedly being taken care of by. I don't know if it's like if he's like in some kind of orphanage or if it's someplace else, but
Yeah.
it seems like that he's going by a different name now, but yeah, that's about it. And then later by the post credit scene, we see like I guess some kind of human expedition or human colony. Um, like supposedly they just detect like some kind of like gate disturbance somewhere out in space, or I don't know what that planet is. Maybe it's like a post apocalyptic Earth or something. But
Well, I think they
yeah,
said
supposedly
earlier
like the
in one of the earlier episodes, as he explained, that they had migrated to this planet because Earth was uninhabitable or something.
yeah, and supposedly that based on this transmission that some kind of force is coming through some kind of gate. So this could be indicating that this might be the new antagonistic force for possibly by the next season.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. I just I don't know. This series to me it's really weird that they brought Trigun back just to do this. I really don't know what this was supposed to be. And I mean, I'm kind of even more shocked that they're doing another season. Because I kind of, with the way they were rushing through the plot, it seemed to me like it was just going to be like one season, and then they're going to be done with it. So I'm kind of surprised they're doing more. Um,
I mean, I at the same time, I'm kind of glad that there is going to be another season or
uh,
core, whatever you call it. But I'm what I'm hoping for this next season is for them to at least try to fix some of the problems that they had in this
the
one.
problem,
Not
the,
to,
so there's a few problems I had with it. Like, and a lot of it really has to do with the way that the characters are written, and also the breakneck pacing of the plot. Um, the characters to me don't resemble the original characters from and I've mentioned this before, but I mean, they just don't resemble their original characters to me. They they feel very one dimensional in comparison to what they used to be. The world building just wasn't really there like it was in the original series. We don't really have, um, we just haven't really established things before we really build up to the big reveals of the series like the original did. And it just I mean the main problem is just it's kind of just two things. It's really the world building and the lack of the characters being at all resembling what they used to be and having any interesting development. The characters just I think are the biggest issue I think that needs to be fixed if they're going to do another season. I don't really have a problem with the CG. I thought, for the most part, I thought it looked fine. I wish they would have just had Vash look like he did in the last episode, like for the whole series, instead of this new looking the way he looked like, the redesign, I guess. The only redesign I was mostly okay with was Meryl. I think with Vash, I just hope that if they do another season, they have him look like the original Vash, and not like he did. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like for the most part, it was fairly mediocre. Like if I were to give it a number rating, I'd probably give it a 5. I just don't know who this was for as well. Like I don't know if this was for newcomers because it doesn't work as a series for newcomers to Trigun because it's not a good introduction. Because of the reasons I mentioned before, it doesn't really give you a good idea of who these characters are, like anything about the world. It just introduces the conflict between Vash and Knives, and then it just it feels like it rushes through the plot at a breakneck pace after that to try to get to, like, I guess the final confrontation between Vash and Knives, and it doesn't really bother to explain too much about the world they're in or really develop any of the characters. Um, and it's so, I mean, for those reasons, it's like you're better off watching the original series, even though, it's I guess, as some people who have read the manga have said, it's not the best adaptation of Trigun, but to me that doesn't really matter so much because I feel like it still managed to be decent for what it was, and this was just, it just didn't work for me, because of the aforementioned reasons, and I mean, like, even if you're a diehard fan, like even if you're somebody who I guess have read the manga and like what they're referencing, I mean, it still wouldn't work as an adaptation because it's really, like, I would imagine there's quite a few things that are being skipped over, and that it's not adapting at all.
Yeah, I mean, and not to mention the fact that that this is supposed to be a space western. It just didn't feel like it. It just, there's just like a lot of sci-fi plot elements just being thrown in there throughout the entire show, and not to mention the fact that the conflict between Vash and Knives pretty much overshadowed the entire show rather than just like having some own standalone like moments that could have helped develop some of the characters, but they just needed to put the whole Vash versus Knives thing in the forefront throughout the for the majority, because we don't get, like you said, we don't really get to know a lot of the different places. Like Janora Rock, like, immediately gets destroyed by the third episode. July is already pretty much destroyed by the end of the season. So, I mean, I don't know where else they're gonna end up going after this. So, I mean, for this next season, whatever they said they're calling it the final phase or something like that. I mean, I'm hoping that they at least try to fix some of the problems they had in this season. Maybe redesign, or just like get Vash to have his original design back. And of course, now with Millie finally coming into this next season, maybe at least have her play a role, and not to mention develop Wolfwood a little bit more. Have have that developing relationship with Millie this time around, and see what happens to. And assuming
that was one
of
the problems too with this season is that Wolfwood didn't have anybody like Millie to kind of bounce off of. Like, there wasn't any sort of like dynamic like there was between him and her in the original series because she was just absent. So I mean, I'm hoping that they can use that as an opportunity to hopefully somewhat develop Wolfwood's character, because it's just, I don't know, he just does it like I said, he just doesn't feel like the Wolfwood, the original Wolfwood, at least not to me.
Not to mention that, like, a lot of the a lot of the story content involving Wolfwood is just, like I said, it's left unresolved. Like, his friend Livio still works with whatever organization he's in. I think the doctor that was working with Knives, he ejected I think a saucer containing all those plants that were impregnated to, I guess, birth the Independent. So that could play a factor into the next season. So we'll have to see where they're going to end up taking that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I just don't really have too much else to say about this. It just feels like it's just, I really wish this was, this just wasn't the reboot I wanted for Trigun, to be honest. Preferably, I'd want something like Trigun Badlands Rumble, which I forget when they did that. I think it was like early 2000s. They did that movie. That's kind of how I wanted a modern Trigun to look. Preferably I'd like Madhouse to come back and do it. I mean, like I said, I don't really have an issue with Orange doing it. I think that my issue mainly lies with the writing and the tone of the new Trigun, and how it just feels very, it just doesn't feel like Trigun. Trigun Badlands Rumble, even though it was, I guess you could say, probably like a filler story, it still felt like Trigun. It still felt like characters still felt like the Trigun characters. The tone still felt like it was Trigun. This just felt like, I don't know what this was. It felt like, I guess, metaphorically wearing the skin of Trigun, but it really wasn't. I don't know.
It almost felt like I don't know. I don't know where they were going for this, but I maybe this could be some kind of prototype season to at least showcase how they'll perform maybe in the next season.
Mm.
I don't know, but I'm just hoping that that final phase season, whatever they're calling it, will improve upon like what we saw in the first season. I mean,
Yeah.
it just left a lot more to be desired, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, but I don't really have too much else to say about this episode or the season as a whole. I don't know if you have anything else to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a release date for this final phase. I mean, I could assume that they could release it next year, but I just honestly, I just hope that it'll be a little bit better than this first season, and maybe hopefully make some improvements now that they're finally adding Millie back into the cast.
Yeah.
So here's hoping.
Yeah, I mean, also here's hoping they at least keep Millie somewhat close to how she originally looked and don't go too crazy with any like a redesign. I am kind of concerned about what they might do with that. But I guess we'll just have to see what happens with that. But yeah, guys, so that all being said, until next time, we will see you all later.